All right, so you guys can just keep on chatting here the whole time for an hour. I can just actually go have a nap if you want, but instead, why don't we actually get started? Since we're already 2 minutes into it, so you guys are just having a great conversation. I just kind of let it go. So, welcome everyone, all of our attendees, the most attendees we've had sign up so far for this, and this is our 29th episode of What Keeps You Up at Night, Entrepreneurship During Challenging Times. My name is Colin Weston. I am the community leader for Startup Vancouver, which is one of over 40 chapters of Startup Canada across the country. And if you don't know us yet, we are that connective tissue, that voice that brings together and supports the 3.5 million entrepreneurs in this country of ours. So I'm going to share my screen here quickly and run through some community announcements, let you know what's going to go on for today's show. All I got to do is find the right one. Here we go. Oh, geez. See, spoiler, I already put it right back all the way to the end, so I'm going to have to go to the front here. Rookie move.
You might think Colin is getting better at this.
I know. Actually,
29 episodes.
I think I'm actually, Reza, I think I'm actually getting worse here. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Oh, this is how we roll, you know.
We do. And we've got this down now that that Reza actually makes sure he steps in and talks the whole time as I fiddle around here to actually get my screen showing there, which took that was actually, I think, a personal worst there. It took me at least a minute to actually get that rolling. But here we are. Now you can actually see it. So on today's show, we have another 3 amazing guests. We have Kathleen Kaulins, who is a technology investor with Vistara Capital Partners. We have Sam Mehrbod, who is
I don't think we have the right screen on.
Yeah,
I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Without these moments, the Startup Vancouver show is not Startup Vancouver.
What is
we need moments like this
on here today? Let me share that screen again. All right, let me see if I can get this right this time.
Colin, you're still faring better than I would be, rest assured.
Oh, that is so kind of you. So kind. You know,
but genuine and serious.
Well, see, this is the thing, though. This is all about the entrepreneurial experience here. You know, there's no failure, right? Even though I think Reza and Maryam may give me an F- on this one here. But you know what? It's all about experimentation. I just experimented on how to do that the wrong way. So there we go. So now can you see everybody's face there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Let's start again at the top. On today's show, we have Kathleen Kaulins, technology investor with Vistara Capital Partners. We're also going to have Sam Mehrbod, who is the CEO and co-founder of roomvu, and then Kookai Chaimahawong, who is a VC associate with Pangaea Ventures Limited. And as we always have here, we always open with a little segment that we like to call Hang in there. How is everybody hanging in there? How is everybody doing? We're knowing now that, sadly, that the COVID numbers are starting to rise up a little bit, as they said they were going to do in the fall. So just everybody, please stay safe, be responsible. We're doing our best, but stay connected. And that's the reason, the why we put the show together every week, because we talk about everything out there in entrepreneurship, business, and life is so heavy these days that we just want to add a little bit of levity, a little bit of fun, while still being inspirational and educational and informative here. And we know that our 3 guests today are definitely going to be bringing that to the table. So like I said, everybody stay safe and weather this storm, and we'll get back to where we need to be, and we'll see each other in person. Hopefully even my 2 co-hosts were joking around. I haven't actually seen them in over 7 months, even though we see each other every single week. So we certainly are looking forward to that. So with Startup Vancouver, the best way to connect with us is through social media. We're very active on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and also with our LinkedIn community page there also. So all the events that we host, and also the ones that we co-present with the other partners that we have and everybody else within our innovation ecosystem. We share the love and just give you that information so that you can, as we do, connect with other entrepreneurs, and also the events and resources that you need to hopefully succeed in your entrepreneurial endeavors. And we are also quite active now on our YouTube channel. Every recording, including this show after we're done, will be posted up there. So if you want even more doses of entrepreneurial inspiration, you can go back and see our 28 previous shows that we have so far done. So I know this is very self-congratulatory here. I know as Canadians, we're always told we're too humble. So here we go. I actually was just on the Startup Canada podcast, and today they just launched that. So if anybody is interested in learning about my crazy up and down entrepreneurial journey, starting really 7 or 8 years ago, completely different place where I am now, but that's part of the journey. As they say, non-linear, that you can go to the Startup Canada website. We'll provide the link to that later. And I was having a good hair day there. That's definitely pre-COVID there. So remember back in the days when we used to get together like this? Well, like we did with Startup Drinks every month, with over 200 people would show up, and that kept growing until, of course, that came to a screeching halt right after the one we did in March here. But we are creating a virtual version of that, and this is through Startup Canada. So we have a community mixer, which will happen this Friday at noon for an hour by Zoom on all of our social media accounts. We do have that pinned and posted there, and we'll also include the link to that. So, hey, if you want to attend that, this will be fun. We're not providing any of the drinks this time, unfortunately. So, hey, if you want to start drinking at noon, that's up to you. But please join us for this. I think there's already 70 or 80 people signed up for this. So please join us on Friday for our Startup Vancouver Community Mixer. We also have another event series, which is our Can Startup Stories, which is been now the virtual version of our very successful Van Startup Stories. And this month, we're going to be celebrating clean tech entrepreneurs with our friends from Foresight as our presenting partner. So that's going to be on Wednesday, October 21st at 4 p.m. We start those, and that is free to attend also. So please join us for that, because the stories that are presented there are more like a TEDx talk, and they're really impactful. So yeah, we'll have that registration link also. With what we do here, with what keeps you up at night, we want this to be interactive. So all attendees today, both on Zoom and also on Facebook, please post questions for our guests. And so put that in chat and also in comments, and we'll ask those when we have the sessions in between to make this as interactive as possible. We are very proud to have as our charity partner an organization called Jack.org. And Jack.org is a mental health advocacy for youth charity that is so impactful with the work that they do. And we're very proud to say that we've raised over $500 so far and donated that to them. And that keeps growing every single week. And today we have 2 donations. So as I do at the end of the show, I will be doing a little musical shout out. Don't think I did one last week. So yes, be braced and forewarned for that. So of course I have my fabulous co-hosts, Maryam and Reza. They're going to be joining us, and they're going to be talking to our guest today that I mentioned. As I said at the end, I am going to be chatting with Kathleen. In the middle, we're going to have Reza chatting with Sam. And to start things off here, we are going to have Maryam in conversation with Kookai. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to hand it over to Maryam to get things going here.
Thank you so much, Colin. Kookai, I really enjoyed just, learning more from you through your social media and your bio, and it's very impressive. And, you're quite adventurous, as I was saying early on, which I love, like you just get out in nature. And I'm wondering, how did life lead you to where you are now? You're working on so many impactful projects, so many interesting projects. And what led to one thing led to another thing that you're here now working on all these amazing projects?
Yeah, thanks. I love telling my story, actually, because I think I come from a very unlikely background in venture capital today. So, just for the context, I'm working for Pangaea Ventures. I'm an associate here. So we are a venture capital fund that invests in advanced materials innovations, or hard tech or deep tech. as I always share, if it's science-based and something that you can touch, it's all a fit for us. So that's like the easiest explanation. But my background, I actually came from a nonprofit world. So I used to work for the UN in Thailand, actually. So I moved here 3 years ago. And so that's why I say it's kind of like an unlikely background to venture, where typically you see people with like finance or like engineering backgrounds, especially that we invest in really deep technical, hard tech companies as well. I'm not a technical, like I don't have the technical background. Even for my undergrad, I did marketing. So, it's quite different here. And I used to think that, way back when I was working for a nonprofit, now looking back, I actually see the similarities in the work that I do. And so way back when, I used to call myself kind of like a Robin Hood. It's kind of funny actually, because I used to feel like I would go in and rob corporations, no kidding, and asking for sort of like the spare changes so then they would support obviously the societal and environmental causes. So hence sort of like the Robin Hood feel. And so, I got frustrated, because that was the only thing that I could do. And that was the only sort of, capital allocation that could be made from, certain corporations to support the world. And so, I came to, Vancouver to do my MBA at UBC. And so, that's sort of the path to the business school. And then I got a chance to, come into Pangaea to really set sort of, so Pangaea, we invest again in hard tech, advanced materials. We always know that investing in this areas is impactful, but it's a matter of quantifying how much. And so Pangaea was really kind enough to kind of invite me to do sort of like the internship, looking at the impact of our portfolio companies and kind of laying out the strategies. And so the similarities that I shared with you earlier, what I feel is that way back when at a nonprofit, I used to look for nonprofit organizations that have solutions to the world's biggest problems. Today, I'm doing the same things, but obviously with that financial returns in mind as well. So that's sort of the similarities here, and that's how I kind of like my path to venture, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like your interpersonal values are very much aligns with the cultural values of the company you're with now, which is great to, it's great to hear that alignment is there. And I'm just wondering, what are some of the questions that you think entrepreneurs should ask you when they meet a VC?
Yeah. There's different, obviously, the first meet, for me always, I feel that being in venture capital is such a humbling experience. You really get to ride this entrepreneurial journey without being the entrepreneurs yourself and supporting them through, capital. And so I'm always super humbled in when meeting with entrepreneurs and really listening to, what they're working on and what they're building. So, I just want them to tell me all the stories, really it's a conversation. It's about learning what they've been working on some of them their entire lives, because some of these are like, thesis, PhD thesis, or, what they've really worked on for a very long time. And so I just want them to really tell me the stories. One thing that I really emphasize on, I do personally believe, and maybe this is my background, but I do personally believe that business of venture capital and funding in general is identifying solutions to the world's biggest problems. And so, the bigger the problems you identify, obviously, I think it translates to the bigger the market. And that's something that I think we're seeing today, sort of the convergence between financial returns and how, VCs typically would assess deals and the impact being created are now sort of the same stories. And so, one thing that I tell entrepreneurs today is actually obviously the entire pitch around like start with a problem statement and the solutions that you have. I think it's really quantifying that problems, quantifying, how much of your solutions are serving, those needs and how urgent are those problems that you're solving. And so, if you look at Pangaea's website today, we just launched a website that really, placed emphasis on impact, and that's around, CO2 reduction, lives being impacted through our health investment, food as well as water as well. So, these are the areas that, we think really, if you have solutions that are catered to those impact metrics, you are really solving something significant and there's market there for you. And so that's just the way that we've kind of shifted our thinking in terms of the market as well. Instead of saying like, we're energy investor, we're health investor, we are, electronics investor, like we really are just like an investor that are looking for big problems.
I love it. And I did notice that you have health and well-being in there as well as one of the categories, and especially with the pandemic, what we're going through. Are you seeing that more founders are reaching out with solutions to address well, like mental health or, are you
Mm-hmm.
getting more of those requests?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think in terms of the, mental health, well, I actually spoke to a company this morning that, they have a solution that caters towards stress management. So, coming up with sort of like personalized nutrition, personalized sort of like nutraceuticals, just for stress management. And that's something that I see the trends. I think we'll see more sort of like, because we're in a hard tech, side of things. So we see more of like food as medicine. That's something that we're seeing more. But in terms of the pandemic, I think what it has actually done is accelerate the need for, solutions that are what I call must-haves versus nice-to-haves. So, those are things like food security, food waste. 30% of the food we produce today in the US are wasted each year. So that's pretty phenomenal in terms of, the how bad the problem has actually been. And we need to feed 2 billion more people by 2050. And so, that's something that like I've just been on my mind in terms of what keeps you up at night. I watched Interstellar last night, and sorry, off topic, but I watched Interstellar last night, and that's the movie that's directed by Christopher Nolan. And I know we want to keep this conversation light, but I can't help but think like I know like the movie is set in the future and it's so sci-fi, but like, will we go into sort of the situation where like depleted all the resources on Earth, and we don't have enough food to feed people in the future? Like, will we get there? And how do we accelerate the innovations that are solving the problems? But anyways, that movie is brilliant. It's really great. If you haven't watched it, yeah.
And agriculture is a big topic right now, and we witnessed that when the pandemic started and a lot of people started just planting the seeds, the vegetables, growing their own vegetables, fruits and vegetables and everything. And it was really nice to see, and love seeing all these community gardens popping up, and what Ava is also doing with Ava technology. And I think what they're doing in that area is like fascinating as well. And yeah, it's a big concern, definitely. That does keep me up at night as well. I'm like, oh, I gotta go buy a farm somewhere, and start my own.
Yeah.
Learning that way. But so when you meet founders, what are the personality traits that you look for in a founder that say like, oh, this is the person I want to work with?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the typical, as you hear all the VC, panel discussions and so on. We always say we love passionate individuals who, are obsessed with the problems that they're solving, and so therefore obsessed with building the solutions for it. So there's definitely that trait. But actually, personally, what I think, I look for are actually traits, things like, being open-minded in general and being coachable. Not that we want to coach you, but it's just being open-minded to, different perspectives and different opinions. And I think that's how, we really accelerate ability to work with different people. I think founders in general, especially CEOs, like you do have that ability to wear different hats, but the ability to work with different people, diverse sets of individuals. And obviously diversity and inclusion is such a big topic now. And I think we need to see that coming from the founder as well, that, they can work with individuals from different backgrounds, individuals that look differently. And I think that's something that, we are placing more emphasis on it. And personally, I gravitate towards those individuals.
That's great. And I'm wondering, when you give feedback to founders, entrepreneurs that you meet, how can you tell in the way that they respond that they're coachable or not? Like, what differentiates them?
Yeah, I think, I also make it my responsibility and my task as well. I always want to provide feedback at the end of the conversation, big or small, and however much I can help and support them going forward. Because to be fair, like 99% of the times, we don't invest in the companies that we speak to. Like literally, like most VCs, that stats, I don't know how much, but like personally, like last year I looked at 400 companies, and we invested in one company out of those 400 companies pool that I looked at. So just on my behalf. And so, that's so I always want to leave something that they can, go on and suggest and build on from there, or offer connections. But I often meet with some individuals who you know, and okay, so sorry, go back to sort of my responsibility. I never want to tell them what to do. I just want to make suggestions in what I see. And I'm very well aware that, you know, being in the business of VC is just, we're more like pattern recognition. You know, so, you know, we see a lot of companies and we pick the winners. So, you know, I don't want to be entitled in terms of, you know, I know what's best for each company. But some companies that I have provided certain feedback and so on, you know, I get a lot of dismissing, you know, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you know, or talking bad on the competitors. I think that's personally, it's a little bit of a red flag for me, because we also have spoken to the competitors, maybe, or maybe not, but I see sometimes companies saying like, oh, the competitor, what they're working on is absolute, you know, BS or whatever. And that's something that I kind of just think that, you know, you don't need to always, you know, downplay your competitors. Obviously, you have solutions that are unique and differentiated, but you don't always need to kind of just say that, you know, they suck.
Yeah, those are really good tips. Thank you so much. And my last question before I open it up to our audience is, what is that one question that you're just so tired of hearing? You're like, okay, I'm done. Like, do not. Is this, maybe it's not a question. It's just like maybe it's an interaction. The founders like, oh, please that you did this before you came see me, you know?
That's a really good question, actually. I think is when I reach out to companies, sometimes it's also the responsibility from the funder side too, to kind of demystify and debunk sort of the process. And I, you know, because I come from a different industry now, I've learned that VC is not very transparent. And so that's why I like going, you know, to do, you know, panels and discussions like this. So to kind of provide more transparency to the industry. But a lot of the times when I reached out to companies, I'm very proactive. I actually want to, you know, talk to you. I want to learn from you. A lot of the times I always get, well, not always, but I sometimes get the feedback of, oh, we're not ready for you. We're too early for you. I don't want to have a conversation right now. And the thing is, you know, I think that's sort of the myths that I guess some entrepreneurs have, that like, you know, oh, we only need to speak to you when, you know, we are ready to fundraise and so on. I do think the best time to fundraise is when you're not fundraising. We're just getting to know each other. You know, we fund companies with early commercial revenue, but I reach out to companies in the seed stage all the time because I want to get to know what they work on. And actually, our portfolio companies, I would say most of them, we've known them, some even like since inception. So for a few years, you know, and kind of tracking the progress. But sometimes, you know, entrepreneurs may feel that they're not ready. And so I do want to kind of just get rid of that thinking, because it's having conversation, unless you're really busy closing the round, and I completely understand, and that you need to focus on working on the round, and we can have conversation later. But, you know, don't dismiss me just because I'm a different stage investor.
I completely hear you. It's just see me as a human being. You know, we're just one connection, right? Forget about the labels and the titles, right? Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm just going to open it up to my co-hosts, our wonderful, you know, audience and guests, to see if they have any questions for you.
I just want to make a comment. I love this weekly format just because every time you get to hear from different people in the community, and you get to, you know, make new relationships. I highly encourage everybody in the chat to drop a question for Kookai or reach out to her. I put the link to her LinkedIn. I'm certainly going to reach out to you, Kookai, because I think you've got a lot of valuable experience that I personally could benefit in my startup. I'm going to leave it to the audience and Colin.
Yeah, I love that, Kookai. You and I have had conversations before, and just reinforcing all those good things that for entrepreneurs, that basic lesson. I know back in the day, rewinding the tape when I was starting out earlier in my entrepreneurial career, and then looking for investment and making that mistake of trying to pitch to investors and looking for money when we needed it right then, rather than what's the rule of thumb? It's like you should be having conversations 6 to 12 months before you actually need the money, and focus on something called revenue first. Get something called a customer, which will only make you more lucrative and reduce the risk for you as you choose that 1 out of 400 companies as you did last year. So I think so many entrepreneurs confuse that kind of that hustle and grit and that enthusiasm is chasing people down and just kind of barking at them as like what their thing is the best. And you've probably seen it already 20 times that month or even that week.
Isn't there a saying that says, if you ask a VC for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money. You have
I've
to build
heard of that.
relationships.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I've heard of that. And like, Kathleen, I don't know what you think, but like, as cliche as it sounds, it's actually pretty true because I've
Yeah.
actually had companies that like come and ask for advice and I'm like, oh my goodness, I really like what you're working on.
Yeah.
So Bryce does have a question here. He's stepping in. Thanks, Bryce, for that. He asks a question for Kookai. How
Mhm.
much capital does Pangaea have to deploy? And what sorts of things would Pangaea look
Mhm.
for to invest in a disruptor at the seed stage?
Yeah, really great question. So, we're currently on our fourth fund right now, and the fourth fund is 17 million US dollars, so 70. When I say it, it sounds like 17, and I've been saying this for 3 years, and it still sounds like 17. I'm working on it. So 70 is the fund size that we currently have. We're actually wrapping up this fund right now with the last investment we're about to make in the next week or two. And so, we won't have enough capital to invest in new companies until we raise the new fund. And so, TBD in terms of, when the new fund is going to be rolled out. But in terms of the investment ticket size, I would say it's probably going to be the same with the next fund too. So it's 3 million US dollars in a company. We always reserve an equal amount to follow on, so another 3. So when we say 3 million US dollars, typically VCs don't invest alone. We always invest in a syndicate group. So we're looking at a round size between 7 up to 15, let's say. That's sort of like the overall round size, and we would participate with 3. So that's typically sort of like the check size. In terms of the seed stage, so our mandate is companies with early commercial revenue. In hard tech and deep tech, commercial revenue often comes in the Series A. I mean, not to say that we can invest in seed. We definitely can invest in seed, but we just need to see that early revenue, being generated. And so, that's typically like Series A. But in terms of like the disruptor, so definitely revenue means traction. And again, I know that traction means differently for different investors and different people. But, for us, it's just showing that technologies are substantially de-risked. Again, I like to see companies that are have solutions to urgent, pressing problems. Really identifying as a must-have, not a nice-to-have, and that's something that I really emphasize on in terms of the problems they're solving.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So before I flip it over to Sam and Reza here, we do have a question on Facebook here from a Kalana, and this actually is open to everybody. In fact, actually, I'm going to flip the script here because we're going to keep it agile and lean here and nimble and all that good stuff here. We haven't introduced Sam yet formally, but I'm going to ask this question to Sam as an entrepreneur here. And the question from Kalana here, Sam, is, hello, what are the things one should look for into setting up a startup in Vancouver? I'm in the idea stage in ad tech and med tech space. So Sam, as an entrepreneur, an early growth company, perhaps you can turn on your mic, and if you can answer this question for Kalana.
All right. Well, I think it's really depending on the product, on the idea, and on everything else. Like what I learned was creating a proof of concept first, trying it out, rolling it out, and see what customers interact with is the single most important thing. And going off from there, then it gets easier. Then you get to get feedback, you get to learn from what your customers like, and then you can continue building on it. And after that, it's easier to just like pitch to angel investors first, and then get to seed, and then get to Series A. I think what I see my fellow founders see that like kind of do frequently is that they have an idea, they just keep going to VCs, and ideas are great, but it's really hard to implement them. And who gets to implement it first gets to kind of go from there. So that's I think that's my take of it.
Sam, that's a great intro to our segue, because your story pretty much speaks to this demographic. You once had an idea, and now 4 years later, it's a very successful startup. It has a lot of traction. Tell us about roomvu. What you guys do, and how did it start?
All right. Okay. So I think I can just introduce a little bit of a background about myself. So I did my PhD at UBC here in Vancouver, and I realized there's no money in academia. So I started becoming a real estate agent. And I was pretty good at it. I was among the top 1% for a few years. And then I realized there's a problem here. What we need to do is I needed to do a lot of social media posts, a lot of advertising, constant presence on social media. And it was impossible to do it. I was a one-man army. I had to talk to clients. I had to do a lot of client meetings and so on. So what we started to do was starting to basically look into local trends, the important things, and then starting to create media based on those trending topics. And so we created an AI engine that looks at the latest trend and latest things that are coming out about housing markets in different parts of the United States and Canada. And we create content, and we also post it for realtors. We also engage, like how their audience engages with it and so on. We keep promoting that post to audience. But yeah, that's us in a nutshell. But this story took 4 years. It's not as simple as
Yeah,
sounds like that.
and I like this story. I've known Sam for a few years now, and I've been following roomvu's story because one of my really good friends work with you guys at your company, and I've been following, and there are so many micro pivots that you guys had to make, and finally to find what's the real problem solution that you can get great traction on. And the other thing I love about it is that you were a realtor yourself and you were dealing with this problem. I've met a lot of founders that are trying to solve a problem that they don't have, or they've never, had any encounters with it. Whereas you've had this problem and you saw it early on in 2013 to 2015, 16, you saw the shift in the media market and how real estate is drastically changing and how people are communicating. So I love how that all happened. Tell us about, what was the biggest challenge in the past 4 years? Where was the biggest hurdle that you guys overcame?
I think the fun part about startups is that you push the team, you pull things together, you have this big idea and you launch it and nothing happens. And then you do it continuously, you do it for another month and then nothing happens. And then I always say one day when you just fiddling with things, you just change a button or change one simple flow and the magic starts to happen. And then your customers will start giving you feedback, and then you learn from them, and you can go from there. But I think that the key thing that helped us kind of stay in business and past that little bit of a chasm there was the fact that we could adopt real quick. I think adaptability is the key to any kind of startup or venture, because things don't always work out the way you think it's going to be. Things will always change, and the more fixated you are on a set of problems and the more assumptions you make, I think that the more difficult it gets. So I guess what I've learned today is now just launch it first, see the initial traction, launch it again, revise it, see the feedback, revise it until you get it right. And it's okay to make mistakes. I mean, we've done so many mistakes and we've learned from them.
Now, Sam, you guys have raised few rounds for roomvu. I want you to tell us about how you divide your focus between your customer and the feedback and the product and the day-to-day of the startup, and the long-term vision and the VC presentations and the pitch deck, because they're two different things and it can pull you to different sides. How do you find that balance?
That's a great question. I don't know if I do, but it's really hard. I think the key thing is having that longer term vision. And as I talk with more VCs, as I talk with more, and we always go to them for advice, as you guys mentioned earlier. We never have actually gone to an investor and say, hey, give us money. But I think the key is to just have this longer term vision, like a 3 to 5 year plan, but just plan for the day or a week or a month in advance, just for the development team and local teams. And then I think what I learned from this exercise is, or over the past year or so, is that it's actually not a bad idea to kind of explain what the long-term vision of the company is to the employees and to the team as well. It gives them a vision as to what we're doing. It gives them it is pretty long-term. They might not see it immediately, but they would have an idea, and it tends to kind of keep people on the same page as to where we're going and what are the longer-term plans. And a lot of great ideas come out of it because they get to hear it. They have ideas. They get to present it, and I think that's what I start to do now. Like I have these longer-term visions, and I present it to the team every month, and I say, hey, this is what we learned. This is what this is what the feedback looks like, and so on.
Everyone who is an entrepreneur knows how thrilling the journey is. And one of the reasons is because you've got your own team, you've got the customers, you've got the investor. There's so many different groups that you have to pay attention to and keep them all connected. And it's a very thrilling journey. Sam, you mentioned your story has a lot of adaptation, and you guys are master of adapting to different markets and pivoting. Tell us about COVID. What happened last 6 months? Has it changed? How did you guys adjust with that?
I think for us, there was a lot of like up and downs, but the key things we learned was that we can better collaborate online. We can better document things. We can better kind of co-work together. I have my teammates now across the world, and all I know from them over the past 6 months is a Zoom box, but we collaborate so well now, and it's just like your story, like how you guys are kind of connecting every week. It's a box in a computer, but you build connections, and you get to kind of collaborate online, and I think that's what we've learned. Another thing we've learned is that well, we had a painful lesson as well. And I think that's that for new employees, Zoom is not really working. Like they need to be kind of sitting next to a senior person. They need to be mentored. They need to be kind of coached all the time. And it's impossible to do it over Zoom. Like people don't reach out for help, especially if they're newer. They're a little bit shy. And I think a recent JP Morgan story was published, and this was the same over there as well. I mean, it was the same for us.
It's definitely difficult to get adjusted to the new format, and small companies are having problems to all the way to JP Morgan, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. Very valuable for our audience. I'm gonna open it up to you guys to ask questions, and definitely reach out to Sam on LinkedIn and check out their amazing startup.
There we go. Thanks, guys, for that. I just looking in chat, don't have any questions quite yet. I had a question for you here, Sam, and then Maryam, anybody else wants to jump in, please do. So over the last 6 months, really since COVID hit, looking at roomvu, I've just looked a little bit at what you're doing. It seems like you're built for success for this new paradigm shift in the way that business is being done. So obviously you don't want to be overly opportunistic here in that sense of, in setting the wrong messaging. So how have you over the last couple of months been able to kind of recalibrate to really take advantage of this new opportunity, but at the same time managing not to come across as opportunistic with what you're doing? You know what I'm saying with that messaging? Yeah.
I think that you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, our like the past 6 months has been really good for our business personally, like as a business, and like our revenue's gone up like 600% and so on. But what we are trying to focus on is that we try to tell a story, and we try to say that the old way of doing things is like sending out flyers, go door knocking, and none of these work during COVID. And if you want to kind of score leads, if you want to connect with your audience, maybe there are better ways. Maybe you have to talk through content and give them that kind of education that it's not over yet. Like you can use other avenues to generate leads and so on. But yeah, definitely no one, like for the real estate industry, like there's going to be less advertising on the paper. There's going to be less flyers. There's going to be less, even bus ads, I would say, because there's less people traveling, less transit and so on. And we try to educate our audience that, hey, you can do other things too.
So in those first couple of months in March and April, did you sit down with the team as far as your communications also to make sure that you were then putting forward a message that was more on point and very sensitive now? And also, have you or did you kind of tweak your service offering and your value proposition, or amplify certain areas and reduce other elements or features that you were providing?
Yes, we did. Like we did basically change the messaging. We did, and I think these are all like happening at the same time, because we got to be in a bigger category of a company, so we had to think bigger, and we had to also change our messaging from a small company to a mid-sized startup. Like we're like still early stage. Like we're not that many people. We're like 24, 5 people, but yeah. So like we had to do a lot of iterations and constantly change our messaging. And I think that's the whole adaptability story. Like you just need to keep like revising a little bit, not too much, but like changing the messaging and so on.
I love that. You're not doing the P word, I'm a fan of. That is pivot. To me, pivot means is you're kind of giving up on what you're doing and going after something completely different. It's more of retargeting and recalibrating and enhancing what you're doing. Hey, Maryam, I want to ask you, is there anybody have any questions in chat, or do you have anything you'd like to ask Sam before I flip it over and have a chat with Kathleen here?
No question in chat, but I was just wondering, Sam, if you, are you also doing drone photography or videos?
Yeah, we do have a part of our services that we have photographers in demand, and we do help realtors with drone and videos and so on. Yeah, and it's definitely getting more interesting as we kind of move through different times. Like we had, like I remember our photographers wanted to do neighborhood shots, and every business was closed. So we were down in San Francisco trying to get like neighborhood videos, neighborhood shots, neighborhood explainers, and there's nothing. Like everything is shot. So it's like we're definitely learning new things in there as well, as to like how to.
Using drone from the beginning, or when did you start introducing drone photography and videos for your business?
I think we had it like it's a photography related service, right? So it like from day one, like from like 2 years ago, this was always a demand for realtors. So we had that available to them.
Yeah, amazing. I have more questions regarding that, like the recipes, but it's okay. I'll ask you.
We go.
All right.
Well, Sam, Reza, thank you for that. Appreciate all the insights there. There is another question here on Facebook. I'm going to hold off on that for a minute here. So I do want to make sure we have enough time here to have the conversation with myself and Kathleen now. So I, again, did want to introduce Kathleen Kaulins, who is an investor with Vistara Capital Partners. In my understanding, your real key focus is on enterprise software in the SaaS space, and key verticals are fintech, security, and healthcare, which especially the healthcare piece, I'm really interested, Kathleen, to hear your thoughts of what you're focusing on and see opportunities here, of course, in the pandemic days that are upon us here. So to start, Kathleen, I'd love to introduce you, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit about yourself to get us started.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great to meet everyone. As Colin mentioned, I work at Vistara Capital. So our philosophy is providing flexible capital to specifically technology companies, either technology or tech-enabled services across North America. So we focus on companies that are doing typically $10 to $50 million in revenue, and our typical check size into these companies is $5 to $25 million. We take a wide view within a kind of B2B software. So as Colin mentions, we have companies in, kind of the fintech space. We invested, we have 3 companies now that we invest in in the first half of this year in the unified communications space, so digital experiencing and monitoring as companies move to the cloud. We'll also take a look at things like ed tech or healthcare. So do have a pretty wide purview. And our fund is unique maybe in the sense that we do have the ability to invest across the capital structure. So investing in both debt and equity. I'd say roughly 70% of our portfolio is in debt and about 30% is in equity. So many times, especially during the pandemic, we're seeing companies who don't want to price the equity or don't want to take the dilution associated with the down round, and instead use debt capital as a form of growth capital in their business to really continue to be able to invest in growth without having to price equity necessarily today.
Got you. So for a lot of entrepreneurs out there, if they don't quite understand that for debt, so you're not, in that case, I'm assuming, not diluting their cap table in that case there with a debt play. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We kind of say we're dilution-friendly growth capital solutions, and actually we joke about it now, but one of our portfolio companies called us rental equity, and we actually thought that was quite fitting description of what we do and really providing longer-term capital. So our capital typically is kind of 3 to 5 year interest-only term loans, so you're only paying interest, can invest that capital over the long term, and then Colin, as you mentioned, not necessarily all of that capital is permanent capital on their cap table going forward, but is really rental equity for them to grow the business without having to sell part of their company in ownership.
Gotcha. So a question I'd like to ask entrepreneurs, I'm going to ask you in the VC space here. So rewind the tape to the first couple of weeks in March. So for Vistara, what was that like? What was the first 3, 5, 6 weeks like, as far as kind of the tumultuous change that you had to make and perhaps kind of realign and recalibrate all the things that you were doing? Did you guys put everything on pause first to take a deep breath? Or tell us the first couple of months of the lockdown and the pandemic of what you did business-wise.
Yeah, I think for every fund and every entrepreneur, every company, it was different. I think for us, we were really fortunate that our portfolio was quite stable. So taking inventory of how we could assist, and as well as the health and outlook of the existing portfolio, we were fortunate, that was in good shape. So we actually were busy. We had the busiest quarter we've ever had in the fund's history in Q2. We closed 4 new investments in the kind of 3 months of the second quarter, conducting, what was new for us was conducting that diligence 100% remote. But we were actually quite busy. And I think part of that was, the initial kind of uncertainty that came with the pandemic obviously served as quite large catalyst for companies to shore up their balance sheet. And with a high degree of uncertainty and how long COVID would persist, really was kind of a rush to get capital in the door. This was also before a lot of the government programs and PPP loans came out. And so before there was certainty on kind of what the government aid or government packages would be, companies were really looking to make sure they had capitals to survive. So we actually saw a big spike in deal flow and obviously completing deals on our end as well.
Got it. So now that things have changed a bit, seeing that you do have in your portfolio and your investment thesis, as I mentioned, you've got 3 or 4 different buckets. Are you finding some of the buckets are becoming bigger, some of them are becoming smaller? Let's touch on healthcare also in that. Is that something you're actually looking to expand because of other opportunities also?
Yep. So in terms of areas where we invested in, as I mentioned, 3 of the investments we've now closed in the first half of this year are kind of in the cloud space related to network monitoring, user experience monitoring. And I would say, we had a thesis that, as workers were looking more flexibility and there were different use cases that need to be supporting. Pre-pandemic, we had a thesis that more and more companies were moving applications to the cloud. I think what we saw is that COVID significantly accelerated that. So maybe cloud investment that was going to happen over 5 to 7 years is now being accelerated in the next 2 to 3 years, as companies now will need to support a greater proportion of potentially remote workforce over the long term, different customers and things like that. So in those instances, we had a view on the space. It wasn't kind of a trend that we're seeing. We want to make sure the investments that we're making are also going to be around, in a year, 2, 3 years, once, the pandemic is hopefully behind us. So they're kind of spaces where we believed, there'd be important shifts and important movements pre-pandemic. Some of them we've seen, pretty meaningful tailwinds. Healthcare is one of those. I love to talk about healthcare. I was actually an operator at a tech startup for 5 years in the healthcare space, grew that company. When I joined, it was around 50 employees. By the time I exited, it was 800 employees. So saw pretty tremendous growth. So spent a lot of time in the healthcare space. I was actually in the US though, so a bit more familiar with the US healthcare in particular, but we're seeing a lot of, as I mentioned, a little bit different from where Kookai looks to focus. We're more on the software side. So we've seen obviously a lot of investment into tools to enable greater transparency, whether that's in pricing and services, obviously big growth in services that improve access, so telemedicine, things like that. So, we've definitely seen a lot of movement within healthcare. I think, again, it's one of those spaces where, of trends that we're seeing is that, with technology, consumers are coming to expect, customization, immediacy in their consumption of goods and services. So the Uber, the Amazon experience in a broader set of products and services that customers are consuming. And healthcare is one of them. I know in the States, insurance is really expensive. It's really complicated. It's opaque. And so it's not a frictionless experience. And so it's definitely an industry we believe is ripe for disruption. And I think we're seeing some of that accelerated through the pandemic as well.
Got it. And what I find interesting right now, I know a lot of people are just hanging on to survive. But from my understanding, in the 2008 recession, that's where a lot of innovation came from during those down periods. You look at out of 2008, that's when Uber and Airbnb and other larger companies that now have become unicorns really started. So that gestation period. So I find it very interesting right now, even though these are very uncertain times, that it always seems like these tumultuous times are just ripe for real long-term innovation. And it looks like you are taking that long view also to harness that.
Yeah, I would say it's actually could not agree more. I think kind of one of the things that actually keeps me up at night, ironically, is I think underinvestment now in the long term. So I think, what I'm starting to see a bit more is that companies are now playing not to lose versus playing to win. And I think that's an important nuance to understand, because underinvestment can also be a death trap over the longer term period. And I worry that there's, in certain companies, a fear of overcorrection. So obviously you need, they say on the airplane, like put your mask on before helping others. You need to make sure the ship is stable and, you've stopped kind of all immediate kind of water. I'm using transportation methodologies here, but analogies, but making sure that things are stable. But then also making sure that you're thinking not only of the short term, but the longer term. And that's hard to do when there's a high degree of uncertainty, but you also don't want to make sure that you are missing out on opportunities to potentially get market share in these instances or acquire new customers. And so I think, Colin, I'm pretty bullish that there's an opportunity, even though, it could potentially be scary for companies to actually make investments. I think those investments have to be calculated. But I do worry a little bit about kind of a balance between offense and defense, and too many companies over optimizing or indexing towards playing defense versus continuing to play a bit of offense in certain situations.
Yeah, that's a great insight with that. So, hey, I have one more question for you before I turn it over to our other hosts and other panelists, and also everybody, the attendees there. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask them. So let's bring it down. Let's like Kookai did. Let's bring it down to this human scale. The fact is, VCs, a lot of entrepreneurs, I know myself, again, back in the day when I started, had this envision of this massive boardroom table that sat, 50 people, kind of the Sandhill Road type of vibe to it, right? Very intimidating, very impersonal, very unapproachable. So tell us a little bit about the size of your team. You're in Vancouver here, what offices you have, and what your team is doing as far as, that cultural experience for you to actually stay connected and stay upbeat.
Yeah, it's I probably say most venture capitalists are in the business because they love people. They're people. They like to be around people, and so I think it's also been hard for us not connect with entrepreneurs. I think, you know, we're social by nature. Our business is relationships and networks. So yeah, it's you have these visions of, yeah, these long boardrooms, but we're people, we're approachable as well. But our team in particular is, you know, we're a really nimble team. There's 5 of us on the investment team here in Vancouver, and then we also added a new team member actually this year out in Toronto. So our team is all based in Canada. About 50% of our portfolio is in Canada, about 50% is in the States. So pre-pandemic spent quite a bit of time traveling to visit our existing portfolio companies as well as new companies in the States. But you know, like companies, we've had to be resourceful and adapt, and figuring out how to collaborate over virtual workspaces. I will say we've been a bit fortunate. Our team's back in office. We've come back in shifts. We have a pretty wide floor plan. So I was extremely happy, one of the first people to raise my hand to kind of come in on a shift basis to our office and get to interact with some of the team members, because I will say there is something special, kind of what Sam was alluding to. There is something special about in-person interactions and some of that informal chit chat that happens, or even it's a little bit less arduous than trying to schedule a call or bringing someone remotely just to say, hey, can I bounce this idea off you for 30 seconds and, you know, just get your initial gut. And so, you know, like a big portion of flexibility in the workplace and remote work is here to stay for sure over the long term. But I do think that there is something unique about being together in the office, and we'll see, you know, a big proportion of folks who will opt to spend a meaningful amount of time in office as well.
And I cannot wait to get back in real life to see all of you and everybody else, because we're hardwired for that. That's what we're built for as human beings, right? That's the way we connect. So I do know there's a question or two in chat. So Reza, why don't I hand it over to you if you can see what's going on in chat there.
Yes. So Bryce asked, what's one technology that you've seen that has the most potential to have the most impact on the humanity? This question is to all the panelists. I'll let Kathleen go first, and then I have a comment on that.
I mean, Kookai seems some really cool stuff that definitely is impacting humanity. And I know they've done some really neat investments lately that I'm always super impressed with. You know, for me, it's just technologies that allow people to do more. I always think, what is our most finite resource as humans? And it's time. And so for me, I think technology that makes something more efficient is one of the most valuable propositions that a software can offer to companies. So, you know, it's like asking a parent to choose their favorite child. What industry I'd say is my favorite, but I would say, you know, in terms of technology, big fan of kind of workplace efficiencies and work processes efficiencies, just because I think time is one of the most valuable resources we have.
Kookai, want to add a comment on that?
Yeah, and just a comment as well, you know, every time Kathleen and I have conversations, because we invest in such different industries, it's always so refreshing to hear how she views sort of her investment sort of thesis and landscape as well, because it's just so different, and that's just kind of emphasized like the need for both of our existence. So I think, you know, what's really interesting, because we focus on hard tech and advanced materials, again, I keep emphasizing that because, you know, it is like we're one of the few funds in the world that has this focus, and we're based in Vancouver. I think one of the things that actually we see is that all the problems that companies are solving sometimes actually interlink. So, you know, we focus on climate change, we focus on food security, we focus on poor health outcomes throughout, you know, health investments. And so actually the problems, you know, one solution to the problem will also interlink with another as well. So, you know, if you're a company that is focusing on, you know, supply chain, for example, we invested in a company that has a solution to extend the shelf life of produce. So extending the shelf life of produce obviously increases, you know, the food that, you know, instead of being, you know, you have to throw away because it's spoiled and so on. But it also impacts climate change as well, because, you know, you're not having to produce as much, you know, food to feed the world's, you know, growing population. And there's actually enough food today to feed everyone. It also impacts poor health outcome as well, because you're eating fresh food. So, you know, that's some of the things that is just, I think there's no one set solution to, you know, a single, you know, problem. It's like, it just all interlinks, and that's really fascinating to me.
I like that. Thank you so much for sharing. And Bryce, I think every person, whether they're entrepreneur or investor, they're focused on their industry, very laser focused. So it's hard to look outside. I personally been super focused on my industry, and I see AR and VR coming up, and they are about to disrupt a lot of things in their own way. So that's another exciting industry to look for.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a super interactive show here today on Zoom, on Facebook, all the guests, all the hosts. This has been, as it always is, a dynamic conversation. And I thank you all for that. And my biggest takeaway today is understanding that venture capitalists are people. That's a thing, apparently. I think both Kookai and Kathleen have reinforced that they in fact are people. So yeah. So to finish up the show here, as I do when we get a donation, I do a little musical shout out. And after I do that, if I don't scare you all away, I'll have Maryam just wrap up the show for us here today. So it goes a little bit like this. Nice donation by you. Jack.org says, thank you. You are awesome. Bryce Wade and Brenda Benham. Nice donations by you. There we go.
Thank you so much. That was lovely, as always. I would like to thank our wonderful guests, Kathleen, Sam, and Kookai, for being here, spending your hour with us. That was very valuable for us, and I bet for our audience as well. And thank you, our wonderful co-hosts, Colin and Reza, for being here. And you can catch us every Tuesday at 12. So see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great
Bye,
week.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.